Hello, welcome to GrayHat and this Blue Team Village talk. Thanks for joining. I hope you and your loved ones are in good health, and I certainly hope you can keep it that way. We are living in a very chaotic time. The companies we work for are dealing with the consequences of the global pandemic, digital transformation efforts, skills shortage, and the work we do is impacted by that. Our workloads are increasing and it's hard to keep your head above water. So you might find yourself asking some of the following questions. Is the work I'm doing still effective? Am I making an impact? Am I using my full potential? And do I work on those things that matter most? So let's look at some of those things and look at those things we can do to take back control. Work on those things that make a lasting impact. Let's take action to make sure that we can do the things that we signed up for. Welcome to Schrodingers CISO. Is your information security program dead or alive? So for those of you that I've not met before, on or offline, my name is Lyzia van Iterson. I think of myself as a technology-minded infosec professional, a design thinking family man that, besides cooking and drinking, occasionally finds some time to do some gaming, only to find out how rusty his skills have become. Today we'll talk about other things. I'm looking forward to present a couple of things that I've learned in my career in this industry. So my talk today is broken down into 3 topics. Organization will set you free, which broadly covers governance, strategy, tactics. Relentless improvement, which discusses a hybrid approach to hygiene efforts in security and how to create efficiencies. And the third, the human factor, which mostly discusses how we deal with distractions and how we can lead alongside our colleagues and other teams. For each topic that I address, I've selected a principle from a guy named Bruce Mao and his document called, a manifest called An Incomplete Manifest for Growth. Bruce has been an inspiration throughout my career. He's massively optimistic, something we need, and he lives massive change, which he wrote books about and created movements around. So for me, he's a big inspiration, and I picked some quotes that are loosely tied to the subjects I'm addressing today. These quotes inspired me and my work, so look him up if you're interested. But for now, let's move on. So, organization will set you free. Organization equals liberty. Let's dive in. So we're finding ourselves at the start of an infosec program. Why exactly, you may ask? What are some events that can lead up to getting to the point where we need to start a program, need to start a new initiative? Valid events that I can think of, post-breach. You might be restarting your efforts, or you rethink the way you run your program because you've learned that it might have not been as effective as you envisioned. New business models, so your company moves into new territories, adopts new technologies. These are not necessarily covered by your policies. You might not have the expertise to address that, so you need to build up a capability. That's a good reason to either start up or extend your existing efforts. A program is non-existent. This is still the case today in quite a few organizations where the security efforts are deeply buried under the CTO without a dedicated person leading the efforts. And companies might realize that might not be a sustainable way forward, and they have the ambition to start something new. It can also be after merger or acquisition, when you want to integrate companies and bring them under the same set of policies, and you define a program that will facilitate that process. And even if you're not starting a new program, the mindset that you require to build one will really help you to enhance and extend the efforts that you are putting in right now. So I think there's something in here for everyone. So starting an infosec program, you're tasked out to build this out. You're a professional in this field for quite a while. Maybe you learned some lessons like I did from how not to do it. So you start thinking about how to approach this. You've got some frameworks in mind. You understand the technologies that you have in your company. You understand that you might want to adhere to certain standards, or you might have to comply with certain standards. You also realize it's a lot. It's a big task that you are tasked out to do. So you have to get organized and set yourself up for victory. So here's a lesson that I've learned early on. Even though I like to build and be successful, I like to be center of the attention. But you gotta remember, it's really good not to go at it alone. You need a plan. You probably can think of all the things you believe that need to be done prior to starting up. But my first program was built on the ashes of a poorly managed and poorly governed set of efforts that was executed a few years before I started. And I realized that it might be good for me to get some good advice from somebody with a bit more experience. So I needed somebody to help me out, validate my ideas, turn that into a plan, carve out a strategy to execute that plan. And I still call in great experts when I prepare for delivering my work today. There's a lot of amazing people out there that really can boost your efforts. And you can go farther based on their experience and their expertise when you stand on their shoulders to carry your work forward. So another benefit is that somebody who's been there, who has ran a program, who has learned some lessons, has probably learned these lessons as well. Because you are planning for creating a lot of change. And if you don't know yet already, you know it now, people dig change. But they want everything to stay the same. Another fun feature that comes with people, and they come preloaded with it, and you got to work together with a lot of people, is they got lots of opinions. They stick to certain beliefs and behaviors, and you got to face that as well. These are things you got to take into account before you start your program. We'll talk about culture, because that's what this is, a bit later on in the talk, and how this might affect you. So having learned this up front, preparing together a plan, you will realize you might want to get some air cover to deal with all these distractions. And what that means is get some good steer. Get a steering committee and make sure that there is representation in that group with leadership from outside IT. I've learned that up front, working with a really amazing consultant that taught me the importance of this, and I worked with him to influence the people that I wanted to get into my steering committee and steer my efforts, and we successfully did so up front, and that paid us dividend throughout the time we built out this program. So the other thing the consultant will be able to help you out with is, help you get a bit better direction, and turn that into a plan, break it down in some manageable chunks of work. And I realized that it's much nicer to work in a team on these things than in isolation, thinking your own things and really being a bit in an echo chamber. It will cost you some money, but this will pay you dividends as well. So you will be better prepared, knowing where you are, knowing where you want to be, and reap the benefits of that. Because the advice that you took on board, get some good steer from outside IT, you have a far bigger chance to be successful with your program, And you're going to need it because whatever you come up with, your plan without proper steer and support is their breakfast. So, a steering committee. They will help you prioritize your efforts. So if you go out about doing that, getting that steer up front, it will actually help you shape your program. You will define the structures that you will need to get the support you needed to communicate the mandate down. And the one thing that you need to take care of is that you evangelize your efforts about your product to these people internally. Really sell the benefits that you can bring to them and their parts of the business. And the people you should consider to include is representation from finance, risk, legal, HR, and of course IT. And if you do this right, your IT leadership will realize that the program that you run that will heavily impact their function will get the support and buy-in from all these other company bodies that will really be helpful in dealing with budget issues, with pushing out your awareness programs, working together with legal on purchasing and meeting legislative requirements that go wider and further than just IT security. So spend some good time and effort on this part to save you some time with fighting pointless battles later on in your program. So my advice is don't go at it alone. Get some solid steer. Organization will set you free, and don't forget that culture eats change for breakfast. All right, so enough about preparation. We're going to talk now a bit more about moving into the territories we need to work in. Not necessarily conquer these territories, but cooperate. See where we need to work together with what other teams within IT and outside IT throughout the business. So command and conquer, I like the concept, but in our work it's a bit more like command and cooperate. So lots of projects that you've defined, you made lots of new friends, which means that you are ready to go in and work with some of the other parts of the company, whether it be sales, DevOps, legal team, marketing, you name it. The work you do will have impact or will affect the way they work, and you will need to find ways to work with them. And that's the next step where a lot of your time need to be spent on to be effective. So what you are doing in each of those domains is start nurturing and growing the projects and capabilities you need to build with the people that you need to team up with to deliver them. The people who have a stake in the area that you are working on. So some obvious examples. If in your program you're at the point where you're addressing data classification, data protection measures, you team up with IT, you team up with legal. That's a good starting point. Third-party security, you team up with IT and purchasing, etc. So let me detail that out a little bit more. What will you be doing? So on the left-hand side, it's you're working on your side of the line, you're working in your field of work, and you need to cooperate and need to get something done in other areas. So what I advise you to do is build bridges and build the entire bridge, right? There's a narrative out there that says, you both build, you each build both ends, both do one half. Forget about that. Build the entire bloody bridge. Cross that bridge. Don't start yelling security word soup to the other side, demanding compliance, etc. Cross that bridge, observe, learn, and cooperate. So really get yourself familiarized with the people and the work they're doing to understand how you can most effectively work with them in their context on the goals that you want to achieve. If you do so, you might create fertile ground to jointly identify the synergies that lie in both your work and define the outcomes that you're seeking that contribute to the success of your program. So for DevOps, if you move into those teams, you will be talking about code scanning, standards, patterns, secure software development life cycle, and you've got to understand how to sell that to them. With legal, you'll be looking at how they can help you push for secure by design, because maybe legislation puts a bit more pressure on IT through legal than through the security program. So that's an area where you might want to team up. Purchasing, you'll be looking at vendor reviews, purchasing standards, developing a way to perform third-party security assessments. But sometimes you just move into a territory and there seems to be nobody to cooperate with, because not all land is looked after equally, right? So what do? You plant some flags, create some new rules. You move in and you find people who are willing to work with you, even though they're not necessarily responsible or leading a team. Let's say, for the sake of the argument, this is a team that's responsible for a number of systems that need regular patching, but critical patches are not being applied, and you want to make sure you improve that. But nobody takes responsibility. You seem to find no one owning the function. Just plant a flag, stick some rules of engagement up there that describe the mandate you have. Look with the people who are doing the work to see if you can help them enhance their procedures, help them aim and prioritize their efforts a little, pull out some metrics that you need to measure performance and measure improvement, and report back into your steering committee that you are working with people in an area, but you find it tough to find somebody responsible to own it. And I always just step in and start helping out and doing that work, reporting back, asking to my steering committee or my management, do you want me to continue doing that work for you until we find out who should lead that effort? Or do you want to hold and wait and postpone the results that we're after for a little while we work on other efforts in the meantime and look for that responsible owner? So that way you use your governance structure to check back whether the work you're doing is what they want you to do, and in the case you're allowed, or it's okay to move forward, you continue to perform process, and you got your air cover, and you still can go and find or build on the results that you're looking for. And while you do that, while you are taking care of the land of somebody else, you might find yourself confronted with the owner flying in, yelling at you, figuring out suddenly people are doing things another way, his people or her people. Doesn't matter if it's effective or not. If it's more effective, it's still not the way they've done it, right? So what do? Well, let's talk. Let's hear him out. So welcome to the wonderful world of meaningful conversations. In my experience, there is a lot of value in allowing people to vent a little, and then look at how you can find ways to still cooperate if those conversations don't make and the feedback you get doesn't make much sense. So you find, in such a case, an operating mode, how you can move back to the original position where you still intend to work together with somebody who's leading in his or her own terrain, and you jointly define a move forward, a way forward. So you have this yelling man keep his own flag, but the new rules, they stay in. And you agree that under the existing regime, it's expected they meet or exceed the requirements that you set. You know, the level of compliance to your policies and how they work towards improving that. And we'll be measuring the outcome. So this is a way how you can deal with conflict or absence of ownership. So my lessons here are: you command where you need to and cooperate. You have to use your mandate, activate that steering board or steering committee. You lead alongside and demonstrate what good leadership looks like, and you will have sometimes meaningful conversations. All right, hygiene times hybrid equals relentless improvement. Now this sounds rather salesy, but this part of the talk will be focusing on how you can build or combine several efforts in your program that would cover a number of controls that you need to tick off. And I use the word hygiene because that's something that the Center for Internet Security once used to describe the basic controls that you need to put in place in a company. So a good starting point for your program. And we're going to discuss what good ways are or effective ways are to take a hybrid approach and tie all these efforts together to go faster and to continuously improve. So starting with some examples of companies that I've seen and how they started their first efforts into moving into the territory of information security. So one company, for example, thought it was a brilliant idea to start with a pen test. First thing you do, execute a pen test. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about the hardship that will cause with the person who has to scope such an engagement, because the customer not necessarily understands what they are asking for. But if you get to a point that you can execute a pen test, based on a package you agree upon, it's usually a good thing that you can use to create awareness with senior management, because any company that does this as a starting point in their journey to get more secure is gonna get, the reports is gonna be a bloodbath, and it will almost make it obvious for senior management to support and fund your efforts. Another example is a little bit less heavyweight. Is call a company in or a consultant in and let them do a vulnerability scan in the network. Credentialed or uncredentialed. I've seen mostly uncredentialed, which leads to a boatload of false positives, and that will put you at serious risk that the output is so big and such a big pack of bad news that it will land in the bin instead of somebody's desk to act upon it. In general, these types of efforts, starting off with them, and I realize I'm preaching to the choir here, is not something, or not efforts you actually can build on, and the effect won't last long, and you got bigger fish to fry. So I propose a better way to start. Because, and I touched upon it earlier, lots of tools that we have in our field of work, especially vulnerability scanning tools, they generate so much noise in their reports that it's really hard to define the actions required to effectively remediate. So you will have to create the context to pull all this data in that you need to be able to improve based on reports like that. So example of how or why this not works in a simple schematic is you might conduct an external vulnerability scan. On top of that, you conduct an internal vulnerability scan, and now you want to correlate those two. Without any other data, good luck. You will have some random hits but it's hard to do. Prioritize the effort, understanding which patches, what to where to start first, and remediating which systems to reconfigure. What findings to go after first. Not possible. So your result will be vulnerability overkill. And if only you had some data to create context around those reports, that would be really useful. Maybe that's where you should start. So if you would look at what you can do with the data that you already have, you might conclude that the majority of the findings in a vulnerability report could have been predicted and potentially prevented. Why? Well, if you run these scans that produce these reports contain an overview of missing patches, out-of-date endpoint protections, incorrectly configured systems, unauthorized software, often out of date. And these things, they're impossible to find in existing reports, right? Asset discovery, system management reports, networking systems, documentation. So in many cases, I'm not saying all the data to create a context is there, but a lot of data is there. So I am a key consumer of that data. I have a stake in having a really good quality data set to create the context with for multiple reasons, starting off with hygiene efforts. So let's call this my incentive for improvement. So in the example I took into this call, or this talk, I've used a program where the building blocks were already carved out and not necessarily one-on-one aligned with a good security standard like the CIS top 20 controls. So here is a list of program deliverables that were in my program and the list of what at that time were the CIS hygiene controls. For building the narrative or the story around this specific use case, I leave the last two controls out because they don't contribute as much as the others for this purpose. But as you might expect, there's a lot of thought going into building these standards, whether it's NIST or ISO or the CIS. There usually is some, these building blocks work and help you build your program. So they usually work very, very well together, and they help you pull out meaningful metrics to report on the progress of your program and steer the efforts. So what I've done is looking in another way at the individual program deliverables, the data that I believe is existent in the company, and how can I create an approach where I drive the quality simultaneously in all of these areas. So I tied them together and essentially the most important thing that I've learned from that effort is that you will have to create, or you benefit most from creating, that little engine in the middle of the diagram. This engine that can correlate, prioritize, and help you aid remediation. That is a centerpiece of tying all this work together. So what goes in the engine? GDPR, for if you are operate in Europe, you have to comply with GDPR. For that purpose, all kinds of assessments have been done, and that has resulted in a systems overview. A systems overview that speaks about systems that hold personal identifiable information. So these are systems that you could assume are at least somewhat critical to your business, or at least from your point of view in terms of protecting those the systems and the data that's stored and processed in them. IT usually keeps an overview of their critical systems. They should have asset discovery and inventory tools. If not, it's not a huge investment to start in that area. Buy a tool that gives you a first set of raw data of what's found on the network. You've got endpoint and system management tools that provide you reports. I usually perform in parallel to working on endpoint and on vulnerability management. You're also performing cloud and perimeter security assessment. That usually pulls up documentation, configurations of network equipment. So there's a lot of information about the environment, about the systems that you pull together, that you correlate to get jointly with the output of your external and internal vulnerability scans. Now, this data that you now pull together will not only help you determine which systems need most urgent patching, correlate which areas, which teams need the most support in executing or remediating issues and performing improvements in the environment. So it's a great way to steer and prioritize your effort to cut through the chaos and really understand where do we need to make the most impact now. That's more of focusing at most critical systems, or where and on top of that, where can I make the most impact? If you look at how much problems you can bite off with a few actions. And if you do this correlation, what you can start doing is also sieve out and correlate, for instance, the difference between the number of assets in your inventory or IT's inventory, and you categorize those. Per category, look at how many of these systems show up in your endpoint reporting, security tool reporting, and vice versa. And what systems show up in your vulnerability scans that don't show up in either. And if you create a process where you do these on a regular basis, compare these, and you slowly can start aligning the sources and looking at how you're going to go to a single source of truth for such information, and how to create a process to keep all these disparate systems up to date if you're not going to go after and harmonizing that. So this is a bit of building your own tools. I've had some great help, great support by building specifically that engine in the middle. There are tools out there that probably help you. There's more likely a lot of snake oil salesmen that can tell you that their tools will automatically deliver this. If they do, please call me to let me know who they are. But there's, regardless what tool you use, there's also always a lot of work to be put in, and you really got to make sure that you organize yourself as well to properly utilize the technologies that are out there to aid this process. Sometimes build your own tools is not a bad plan. This showed me that it works, and if you put this work in first, you have a far better understanding of your needs, which make it probably easier for you to select the best tool to mature these capabilities up in the future. So this slide promises to be a bit of a recap because I skipped ahead in the previous one. But yeah, this helps you steer multiple efforts, be efficient in that space, and it contributes, as I said, to other goals in the company, other teams as well. Within IT, it improves your asset inventory, it aids your remediation efforts, and the data that you collect is very useful. If somebody's looking after business continuity and disaster recovery, if you add application assessments and landscape assessments to this data, you got a really good set of data that can help you carve out or improve your business continuity and DR capabilities. Legal, I touched upon. There's a lot of these things that you need to have organized to be able to comply with certain legislation out there in the field of privacy. So when I threw this deck together, I was simultaneously doing a foundational training on purple teaming, and I saw a lot of parallel, a lot of overlap. To start with, in optimizing processes, combining red team, blue team efforts, and essentially connecting them together, and build efficiencies in between. So there are similarities there in the work that I've done here and what you do or what you need to do to set up for purple teaming. The other thing is that the data we're talking about and that it benefits your or can benefit business continuity and disaster recovery, the same or a large part of the same data you will need for terrain analysis. You actually just sort of worked on the first version, a low-res picture of what your terrain looks like. And if you do that right, you created a process that continuously maps out that terrain and improves the view, ups the resolution, so that you have a much clearer view of the environment you're protecting and of the landscape or the terrain that you're taking into account in your purple teaming efforts. I hope that made sense. I'm open to explore this a bit more, but there's definitely something out there in terms of how you pull this data up and aid your security program and purple teaming. So quick recap. Cut through the noise of security reports, create the context to execute in, find the synergies and tie efforts together. Don't stick to your own domain or boundaries and work together to reuse and repurpose the outcomes of your work and other people's work. Time to breathe. And a bit of the fun part, if you like clowns. So final part of this talk is the human factor, and let's move right in. Because when you have so many interactions, when you drive so much change in an organization, sometimes it feels like you're being attacked by chaos clowns. And they come in different shapes and forms, but it's not all ill intent. Because most of the time, these are not really clowns, but the way they behave makes it feel like they are. So here's some examples. You'll likely meet the person in your organization that are not willing to patch their system because they believe it can't do any harm. And they never done that. They never done aggressive patching, just take your time and just, hope nothing bad happens. So every company has a few of these people running around. Or you meet a project manager who doesn't want to comply with new or adapted policies because their colleague recently went live, or tomorrow or next week will go live with their project and they didn't have to comply. Why should I need to comply? I'm a project manager. I need to go live. I'm already started. Why treat me different? It's got a point. My favorite clown, change manager. This is typically the manager that continuously approves or only approves undocumented change on a daily basis, maybe leading towards the chaos that you're trying to fight and improve. Now you come with a request to harden some routers, to change a baseline for patching, to change some application security controls, to add a new control in the perimeter, to add some cloud controls, enable MFA, I don't know what. But for all of these changes, whether they're big or small, suddenly a business impact analysis is required. Except for the changes IT does in their own environment. Those are going undocumented, all labeled zero risk. These are tough to fight. Or the last example I'm using here, the salesperson who just acquired a brand new software as a service solution that happens to also store and process our customers' PII without involving IT or information security, legal, or purchasing. So this potentially all cause problems for you, and this is blocking your way of moving forward, of delivering progress, improvements. If you look at it more closely, you will find that a lot of these issues are actually cultural issues. Company culture is causing this. Because company culture, for a large part, is defined by the people's beliefs and behaviors. So how to deal with that? Well, I want you to learn about clown mitigation strategies and how you can apply them. I have examples like leading alongside, now, new, next, let them lead, educate, collaborate. So a few words about now, new, next. That's something that is loosely based on McKinsey's 3 Horizons framework. I use it to do a bit of triage in terms of understanding the questions that come to me. What part of the technology stack are we looking at that people are asking me to allow incompliances to occur? So now are technologies that are already implemented and live in production. New are technologies that are still in the project phase. People are preparing those to get into production. And next is the projects that did not start yet. So logically, all 3 requests from the 3 distinct areas require a different piece of feedback or way of looking at them. So new or now, all technologies already implemented. Broad strokes, you will use generic program efforts to assure compliance in that space, and you want to spend as little time on each individual problem, because you're pushing out measures that should assure compliance for all systems that are already in place, where for most of them the policies that you are pushing in did not apply yet or didn't exist yet by the time that they built these solutions. When it comes to new, you really have to look at the risk assessment process, risk management process, because even though you can see from your point of view that there is significant risk with not complying at the time of go live with a new technology, there might be bigger risk associated with going live 3 or 6 months later. So that's where you spend a lot of time finding the trade-off between cybersecurity risk and other business risks, and weigh that in, define a gap plan for the risk that you cannot mitigate and you don't want to leave as residual risk. So you make a plan for closing those gaps after go live and have business sign off for that. And next, that's where you'll really have to put your efforts in building out or advocating for a process where legal, HR, IT, cybersecurity, and maybe the privacy officer work together to really do some proper technology vetting for everything new coming into your environment, so that all bases are covered. So I use the 4 examples that I gave before and look at what I would have done with in such cases. So the system owner not willing to patch, lead alongside, educate, try to understand their rationale, maybe you have meaningful conversations, but explain how the vulnerability can be exploited, what the consequences are. Maybe you can do a little demo in a secure environment. That might help converting this person into a useful ally. The project manager, well, I think you can guess now, new, next, and why. So you really have to engage with the project manager, but more importantly, their stakeholders, and look into how you can get consensus. This change manager, well, it's my favorite. Turn the tables, ask them, please, teach me everything I need to know about this business impact analysis process. Send me the templates and the standards. I'll adhere to them. And can I plan a meeting with you to go through like the first 2, 3, 4 changes that I'm going to go through? You're at risk of learning something new, and this process actually exists, so that's going to cost you some time. Often the process don't exist. It's just a roadblock that has been thrown up to slow you down. This way you can cut through it and don't waste your time like they would, if you look at the triage process, you got to identify those people that are beyond hope and move on. The salesperson who acquired a new software as a service solution, well, educate and collaborate, really cooperate with that person, with the team, with that part of the business that you find yourself in, because you can ask yourself, is there really a problem caused by this person, or is there a deeper problem rooted in the company causing non-technical people acquiring new technology to be used in the organization without engaging legal, without engaging information security, without engaging IT, and see what you can do to work there to make things better. So my recap here, the lessons learned that I learned: check your biases. There's a lot of clowns out there, but not everybody that seems to behave like a clown is a clown. Educate and collaborate, lead alongside, be aware not all clowns wear floppy shoes, and triage is your friend. And with that, I'd like to thank you for joining me, and I hope you've got questions and we'll address those in the Discord channel. Have a lovely day and a great rest of this conference.